Regulatory Policy Committee meeting. Today is May 28th. It is 4 p.m. Actually, it is 4:05 p.m. And we are in the Nexus Board room in the administration building today. So we'll go ahead and get started. Call the meeting to order. And we'll start with item number 1, presentation, discussion, and possible recommendations to revise the board's policy on policies and procedures.
Just a note, no public.
Thank you for that, sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Gonzalez. I'm the Chief Legal Officer and General Counsel for the board. And here today, we're going to talk about something that's been brought up since February, about the possibility of revising the board's policy on policies and procedures. In the past, I'm not going to repeat it unless the committee would like. We need to cover some of the stuff we've covered before. We demonstrated how it's got this history of being tied to how school districts organize their policies and procedures. It's highly structured, down to the font size and various extraneous details. But it also confused the roles that are substantive in the review and creation of procedures from the things that are sort of board level policies in a way that was meant to comply with the Texas Education Code and in a way that's not applicable here and is very cumbersome. So this is a proposed governance refresh on policies. I have a straw man in the packet materials. This model separates and distinguishes between board adopted policies from administration developed procedures to clarify, accountability and authority. It's meant to empower management to update those procedures as needed, increase our flexibility without creating excessive paperwork. It's meant to standardize and modernize our templates over a defined period. Here I proposed 5 years to allow this to be integrated without disrupting everything. I've heard stories about how it was a fairly disruptive process the last time this rigid structure was imposed. And it also is meant to clarify records management and the role in, which was meant to be to enforce the formatting structure, that rigid structure for all the policies and procedures. It almost became a substantive choke point in the approval process. That's why a lot of audit findings were related to procedures and their adoption. This would free up that choke point, as we'll discuss in just a second. So this goes to the why for the refresh. We could probably do a little better because this was, I covered much of this. It blurs board governance and management operations, reducing our agility. Those formatting rules were very cumbersome. And they take up quite a bit of paper even. The multi-level pen-based signature requirements would cause delays, particularly for urgent procedural updates. And those broad record management duties have basically turned it into an operational gatekeeper, and we don't need the record staff in between work getting done and not done. It's a realignment on the governance side because the board would be focusing on just policies while the general manager and CEO and management would develop procedures to implement the policies effectively. That would clear up our accountability because you still have, in your oversight role, that responsibility to oversee operations. But it would allow for operational responsiveness. And it puts, that's where work is sort of getting done in the day-to-day basis. It also allows controls and procedures to be detailed in their implementation, which can support internal controls and risk management. So that clarification of roles for records management, it's essentially a repository, a central place to see which procedures should be in place for the company. Similar to the way contracts has a contracts repository to track active contracts, so we could sort of provide summary information to management and to the board. Likewise, that would be the role of assisting areas with their own procedures if they need it. We would no longer be a choke point in the approval of their procedures because they know their business. That's the governance and accountability separation that I've mentioned. I think it would also help with our transparency and audit readiness and help us with those litigation or investigation holds that need to be implemented by maintaining a repository for records for the policies and for the procedures. So as a practical matter, the straw man I followed a few principles here. Simplifying formatting requirements to emphasize clarity and content, moving away from rigid rules. Minimum content elements are defined, such as how policies will address purpose, scope, and roles, and their review cycles. How often does it need to come back for board review? I suggested a phased 5-year standardization, gradual conversion of existing documents over a 5-year period, which would balance the workload of existing workload of day-to-day operations with compliance, right? Compliance with the new formatting practice. And then creation of that digital repository, taking advantage of developments that we have in tracking information. So this is a discussion item, right, for the board to consider. The board is being asked to adopt a governance policy that defines what the policy is supposed to be, right, and allows the distinction between procedures to, let it be free, go to the management. The CEO has responsibilities under this policy, and that is to implement the administrative procedures detailing document the life cycle of procedures and other subsidiary documents that will now go to different levels of management. For example, it could go to a manager over a department, and that's where certain procedures can stop. Some could go to directors, and others might go all the way through to the executives in charge of various divisions. It does allow for that transition and standardization that people like to see, and it does clarify, frankly, how what a procedure should look like versus things like work instructions. There's a suggested definition for work instructions. We just want to have a recognition that people need to be able to operate and be flexible in their jobs, because our jobs are oftentimes changing. So the next steps and the metrics, records management would be publishing policies. The CEO would be confirming approvals and making appointments to delegations as appropriate for procedures. and the departments would align their reviews, and we would track the progress and report back to the board as needed. So, this is the open part of it. I had in the background materials a draft policy that we could walk through. But I wanted to see if there were any questions so far.
Martin or Daisy, do you have any questions at this point?
Yes, I do have. Paul, you said revised every 5 years. Can you hear me?
That was one suggestion, Mr. Sarkis.
And how often has been revised right now? Like, how often do we revise these things?
Different
Now.
policies sometimes define different review cycles.
Okay.
And this particular policy on policies and procedures was initially adopted in 2015, revised in 2017, as I understand it. And I don't think it's come back to the board since then. So
Okay.
if anybody knows any different, I'm happy to hear it.
Any
So you're
additional questions, Martin?
No, I think so. The recommendation is going to be every 5 years instead of no revise at all. Like you said, since 2015, it's been revised only once or twice.
It got the last time it had board attention that I saw was 2017, right? So it's been.
It's more than 5 years.
Right,
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
you're welcome.
Daisy, you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, I do have a couple of quick questions. So, I mean, the way that it's being presented, I think is very good, right? I think, basically we're saying this is a better approach. You know, we do want to have our policies and procedures. We want them updated. We don't necessarily have to be, tied, you know, to the work portion, and there's ways that we can reduce it, streamline it better, so all of that sounds really good. As far as the, you mentioned the internal audit observations, so are there any, or are you aware, maybe not, are there any that would be addressed by this, adopting this new update?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what this policy would do would clearly define that when we talk about policy, we're talking about board level documents. So they could be the guidance that's used and implemented elsewhere. When we're talking about those procedures are going to be the management approved type of documents that they would no longer need to come to the board. And looking back, all I see are that the policies were really being brought anyway. So this is basically bringing it to a practical.
That's even better.
Reality.
And I know you work with internal audit pretty closely, but I don't know, are you guys aligned on this?
I've mentioned it to Ms. Pinales, but we've not gone over it because she's just an administrative, I
Sure.
just help her in getting her administrative needs met, right?
Is that
And-
here? I didn't see it. Just right here, that's fine. Yeah, I would just say, make sure that, the intent is, aligned, right? The benefit, I think it sounds great, I just wanna make sure that there's alignment there. And especially if it's gonna be addressing several open items, I mean, that is, anything we can do to help, we will do our part from the board side.
I would highlight section 11. Section 11 is an implementation provision. It says supersession and application. And it would point out that this policy supersedes and replaces the board's policy on policies and procedures. So that particular item. This policy supersedes prior BPUB guidance that conflicts with the governance model described herein except where such conflicting provisions are required by law or regulation applicable to PUB, as may be confirmed by legal counsel. And
Sounds like it was written by a lawyer.
voila, and it continues and ends on the next page with existing policies approved by the Board of Procedures adopted by management remain valid regardless of legacy formatting or numbering. In addition, draft procedures adopted and affirmatively followed by management with operational oversight over a section, department, or division are deemed to be in full force and effect, irrespective of any additional steps adopted under the superseded policy, right? There's that reference requiring any review or approval by the Records Management Department. Because we have a logjam as a practical matter. This has created a logjam, and this will free up a lot of that.
No, it sounds, at least from my question, it sounds good. I don't know that there is a way, but I like the way, as you were describing it, I was almost visualizing it. So if there's an image that can be generated, to show, where the policies and how the directors are gonna have, more responsibility, I would encourage you, I wouldn't put it as a gating item, we're not gonna approve it unless you have that, but I think it would complement it whenever that's ready at some point in the future.
Okay, no, the people who are gonna benefit are both the board members, and so you focus on policies and you get your reviews on a schedule, and the management folks who are just implementing, trying to get their day-to-day work done, and now they'll have some clearer guidance. So we would work with organizational development, the training branch of HR to implement anything that ultimately gets adopted. I brought this today with an eye towards, if the committee had other ideas, wanted to bring them on, that's great. If we were ready to have it addressed at the next board meeting, we could do that. It's up to the committee to
I
recommend.
think we can add it. It makes sense. I would just make sure that you review right now. You meant it would be a benefit to the directors. It would be a benefit to the managers. I just want to make sure that it's also understood and a benefit to internal audit. Right? I think it's a win-win-win, for everybody based on the way that I'm understanding.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would probably put this in consent
Will do.
if it's going to be in this next meeting. All right, we'll move on to item number 2, presentation and discussion of revisions to the Brownsville BPUB personnel policies number 9, vacation leave.
Thank you, Chairman Martinez. For the record, Claudia, Director of Human Resources. The policies that are before you this afternoon are intended to help us in addressing the strategic challenge that was identified in our strategic plan of attracting and retaining talent is going to be an increasingly competitive market. With that said, we've made some edits to the policies today that we hope will establish the systems that provide not only organizational flexibility, but also organizational effectiveness for our workforce and addressing that. So the first policy on vacation was last reviewed in January of 2024, and it establishes accrued vacation for eligible employees and the general guidelines for its use. What we've done is that these updates, we brought them into ensuring that they're current and in compliance with federal, state, and local regulations. The policy format was updated and it aligns to the new policy structure. The updates better align with our organizational culture, and as well as allowing for better workforce planning, again, on operational effectiveness and flexibility. at present, on the left side, the current policy, vacation cannot be used once a resignation or retirement is submitted. In listening to our managers and directors, this has created quite a hardship for them when they want to staff behind a person who's leaving. Because of the current policy, a person cannot take vacation time once they've announced that they're going to be leaving. So oftentimes it was forcing them to just give us a 2-week notice. So I'll address that on the proposed side. We're proposing that vacation can be requested once a resignation or retirement has been submitted. So it allows us to expedite a recruitment process while the person is still in place, and they can request their vacation time and not be afraid to use it. It gives us more of a lead time for that. The second item on.
Can I, sorry, can I interrupt? I didn't quite understand that. So you're saying that if they're leaving, then they can still use their vacation time and that will help you?
Yes, what we're proposing is that at present, they're giving us oftentimes just a 2-week notice, and we have some individuals that are in management positions that it takes a while for us to find somebody who is qualified at that level. The longer we know that we can plan for their departure, the sooner we can start the recruitment process. What at current practice is they oftentimes are requesting their time off, which is fine, and it's being granted in accordance with vacation. And then when they are giving us a 2-week notice, we only get that 2-week notice to start the recruitment process. So they could, in essence, they could give us a month. They could tell their director, I'm planning on retiring in 6 weeks. We can start the recruitment process, open that recruitment, knowing they're going to be leaving in 6 weeks, but they might want to take some time off on vacation, and that's fine. Right now, they aren't allowed to do that. So it's really helping us to manage the workforce.
Thank you.
You're welcome. At present, where it says payout at a regular pay, in the policy, we talk about regular pay, base pay, and we're not consistent. So the new edits, payout is at base pay, and that's consistent throughout the policy, so that there isn't any misinterpretation of how their final check will be paid out. The last item on the left side of the screen is that it allows for probationary payout, meaning in the first 6 months of their employment, if they left in that 6 months, we would be paying out their accruals on vacation time. What we're proposing is that they do not get paid out in their initial 6 months of employment. They aren't allowed to use the vacation time in their first 6 months because they're still training in the job. But that said, also for fiscal responsibility, if a person was with us for a 1 month, 2 month, 3 months, all the way to the first 6 months of their employment, we're proposing that we don't pay out the vacation and accrued time.
That we don't.
We don't. Just for the initial probationary period.
Okay. Martin, do you have any comments or questions?
No, no questions.
Daisy? On the vacation, on the first one, wouldn't we just want to remove that? I mean, whether, basically it's going to translate, they can take vacation, whether they tell us they're retiring or not.
So I think where this is exercising management prerogative, but hopefully the open communication between the employee and management, is that they can request it. Because the last thing I would like to do is put in a stipulation that I could give you 6 weeks notice, but I'm also granted 6 weeks of vacation time. That will cripple management. So if we leave it as a request, so then there's the communication between the employee and management. That's really what we're striving for here. So
Okay.
it's not punitive.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, so I'm okay with this. Any other discussions? If not, I would say, just go ahead and add it on consent. Whatever the next one.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next item, item number
Resources. This one is relatively brief. The last time that this was brought to the board was April of 2024. And the current policy, it basically establishes the policy to eliminate accruals, actual or perceived conflicts of interest. What we've done is we've taken this as an opportunity to try to add some clarity to the policy to ensure that our application was not being overreaching in how it was being interpreted, so that it didn't harm us in any way by perhaps creating unintentional adverse impacts in employment, or people saying that I don't want to apply for a job because I might have a relative that works there. We thought it was somewhat overreaching, and I'll get to that in the last bullet point on the right. So again, the policy was formatted and updated, and revised to align in the new policy structure. We added clarity around some of the definitions and the scope of the policy. And again, it was reviewed to ensure that it was in keeping with federal, state, and local regulations. And the biggest change is that we're removing section 3, the reference in the policy, because that was specifically to city commissions, city employees, and city departments. And we have that in our policy, but it doesn't pertain to us. So we're asking to have that removed.
And last time we reviewed it, I catch that?
No, sir.
Yeah, any questions? Martin?
No, no questions.
Okay, yeah, this one looks pretty good too.
Yes,
May I place it on consent agenda?
Yes.
yes.
Moving on to next item, number 4, presentation and discussion of revisions to the Brownsville Public Utilities Board Personnel Policy, TBD. This is a new one, anti-fraud policy.
For a point of clarification, this actually is not a new one.
Okay.
It was established and adopted in December of 2005. However, it was kept as an addendum to the policy book. It was never added as a numbered policy. So through
Okay.
we will incorporate it as a numbered policy with your approval. The policy was reviewed and updated to ensure that, again, it's current with, it's current with federal, state, and local regulations. We updated the formatting. We also, in the third bullet there, we incorporated some of the fraudulent activities so that it added clarification to the policy. And aside from that, we ask your approval to incorporate it into the policy book as a number.
Any comments, questions?
Very clear. No questions.
Okay, yeah, please do include it. We'll move on to item number 5, presentation and discussion of the proposed BPUB personnel policies, number TBD, delegation of authority and chain of command.
Yes, this one is a new policy that we're proposing for the organization. It sets forth the expectations and creates the accountability with regard to absenteeism and expectations of communication and organizational effectiveness. So what we're proposing here is that we have defined who can delegate and who can be authorized in the delegation of authority for temporary absences so that the business doesn't stop. That is key on the delegation of authority. On the other part of the policy is regarding chain of command. Employees should communicate through the appropriate chains of command and seek approvals as required is what we're proposing. And the other highlight I want to make sure that we're aware of is that it sets the expectations as to when they can bypass chain of command. We want to make sure that we are safeguarding against anyone in the organization saying or alleging that they never know that they could go and speak to somebody about a concern. This is putting it in writing and stating, yes, it's part of our policy. We expect you to bring up any issues of concern you have. And if you have any concerns, have you worked through your chain of command to try to get them resolved.
Okay. Any discussion, questions, comments on this one?
So this is gonna be a new one. Do we have this before?
Yes.
Chain of command? Wow. Okay, thank you.
How would the, this chain of command be officially delegated?
So we all have a hierarchy within our departments. So I can use my department as an example. My managers, the managers report directly to me within their respective, every division has their hierarchy. And within their respective divisions, they understand who they go to in case of a question. Should the manager be out? Should the manager be out and I be available? Obviously, they come and they bring any concerns to me. So they keep it within their division or their department to the greatest extent possible. We have had occasions where sometimes employees will go outside of their division and try to find recourse or somebody to solve the problem for them. So it helps us keep those chains of communication.
Okay. Is there a specific issue? I mean, I'm not gonna air that out, but are there issues now that you have in mind and how you generated this policy?
No, there is not a specific issue. This has actually been a policy that has been my history that we've had that just so we could always go back to it. So should an issue arise, we can say it is in policy.
Okay,
It's safeguarding us in that regard.
sounds good. I don't have any questions. I think we're good. We can also, put this one in consent. And I think that is all for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I just want to make sure, so this, where it's written, this will be clear enough for people reading it?
I believe so. We ran them by some employees they gave input and feedback on it. So I think it is clear enough, and we can also train to it in our training as well. It's another document we can train to.
I mean, I would rather just make sure that the writing is clear as opposed to training them as to what it should mean. So yeah, just
Make sure it's user friendly.
test it,
Yes.
test it out a little bit and, yeah, and then I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
Marilyn Gilbert, General Manager, and we'll make sure that the writing is clear. There's some little edits, minor little things. We'll provide a red line if there's anything, and then you all can see in consent if there's anything that I feel substantive, I'll bring it to the committee's attention on here. It just, I agree that the more clarity, the way it is, the procedures, I think, will have a lot of that in-depth discussion of what it means because of what it does. If we go back to the way current policies are written, they're very voluminous and sometimes it's subject to interpretation versus, once we have a procedure, what it applies, and then it goes into more of a management decision versus bringing every single item. We need to come back and bring another amendment to the policy. They're intended to be catch-all phrases.
All right. Well, we have something for closed.
Yes.
I'd like to point out, just if we're gonna go to close on this item, the specific open meetings provision would be 551071. That's the attorney-client consultation, is the shorthand way of referring to that section of the TOMA. It is the presentation and discussion on the compliance report for the 2026 Texas Reliability Entity Audit results.
And, I guess before we decide we're going to close, we would be staying here or do we need to move?
We can stay here or we can remove ourselves and go to our executive conference room. That's up to the decision. But since we have members attended virtually, it might be easier for us to hear and we'll excuse everybody and make sure that the platform that we have for the online viewing has been terminated. And so that way we can discuss comfortably here and
Sure.
recordation is off.
Yeah, and I think anything that we vote on
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes, so we will recess into closed meeting to consider matters pursuant to Texas Government Code 550.551 and 550.71.
551.07.
If there is any approved motion to go into closed meeting, the listeners will be placed on hold until returns. Item is presentation and discussion compliance report 2026 Texas Reliability Entity Audit Results.
The time is 4:42, and afterwards, we will reconvene in open session to close the meeting formally.
started. We're back from closed meeting, and we have no actions. So we'll go ahead and move on. Reconvene from open meeting, discussion and possible recommendation on closed items done, discussion and the request for future agenda items. No, there's none, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.